So with Ableton, QLab, and in my case, the SPD-SX, but you can use whichever MIDI controller you like, you can, if you look at the iPad here, you can control video. This is a video. This is video. This. Now you're probably wondering, well, what happens when I get into the gig and I want to then play samples? Well, the good thing, if I play Ableton, as that plays, you can see it hits a MIDI block, and now the SPD-SX has changed patch, and no videos. I have a sample triggered, and it's incredible. And if you would like these videos that I'm using just to demo this project, then you can find that in the link in the description or just up there. Or if you're one of my patrons, then you'll find that in the Patreon page ready for you as this video is uploaded. So if you're like me and you're using the Roland SPD-SX to control this, then you'll need to download the MIDI driver. It's completely free. Just Google the words SPD-SX drivers. It's the first link there. It's the Roland support page. This will load, and then you just want to scroll down until you see the first one for Mac, which is right here. And if you're on the latest Mac software, then the first one is for you. If you're on anything older than these, then the ones underneath. You'll need to restart your Mac when you do this, so just be prepared for that. But once you've done that, then there's a couple of things we need to set up on the SPD-SX itself before we can dive into Ableton and QLab and that sort of thing. So the first thing is just making sure that the SPD-SX is on the audio/MIDI mode rather than a wave manager. So to do that, we're just going to go into menu, down to setup, then down to option, and the third option down, it says USB mode. Use the plus and minus buttons to change that from wave manager to audio/MIDI. And then once you've done that, you can just hit the kit button and head back to the kits, because now is where we want to set up our individual kits for what we're using it for. So in my case, I want two. I want one to control the video side of things and one to control the audio side of things for samples and stuff like that. So as you can see, I've got one patch called Ableton, and that's going to be all the samples and things like that. And then I'm going to have another patch called Vid MIDI, and this is what I'm going to change to and from when we're controlling the video or the samples. And the key thing here is within both of these kits, we just want to set the MIDI settings. So I'm going to do this on one kit, but make sure to replicate it for both. And the important thing is the MIDI notes themselves. So we're going to go into menu, up to kit, and then using the bottom buttons to go to MIDI. And this is where we can change the individual notes on each kit. So on this one specifically, I've got pads 1 to 9. So that's the top left one going all the way up to 9 to the bottom right, using MIDI notes 100 to 109. Whereas on the Ableton kit, I've got that set to something like, I think it's like 45 to 54. I can't remember why I chose those ones specifically, but there you go. The difference there is that one of them is at a different scale and the other one is on the top end, and that they're different. And that's the key thing. So choose whichever numbers you like, and that is it. The last thing you can do, which you can see on my SPD-SX, is I've just changed the global channel for the video kit to channel 5, just so it means that if I have anything else MIDIing at the same time in my Ableton project, it won't trigger any videos. You can do this too. It doesn't have to be 5, it can be any of the numbers, or you can just risk it and hope that global is fine. But again, completely up to you. Choose any number you like, but that's why you're seeing it on my screen there. The only last thing is that we just want to make sure we know the numbers of those patches on the SPD-SX. So for example, Vid MIDI, as you can see now, is 22, whereas my other one, Ableton, is 16. And that's really important, and we'll get to that later. Okay, so now that we've got the MIDI device set up, in this case the SPD-SX, and then all the notes, now we can actually start getting into the nitty-gritty, which is Ableton and QLab and how it all works. So this is a blank project of Ableton. First thing we want to do is go into settings, into MIDI, and just make sure the SPD-SX is all ticked. You can pretty much copy my settings here. As you can see, I've got loads of stuff, but that's because I mess with a lot of things and you don't have to worry about it. Once that's ticked, that's it. All the MIDI things are now talking to Ableton, or at least they should be, and let's start digging in. So the first thing I'm going to do is just delete these audio channels. I'm going to set up the SPD-SX samples patch, and that's just because then we can move on to video after that. So I'm just going to put this as samples. I'm going to drag an instrument rack and then a drum rack inside that instrument rack, and the only reason why I'm doing this is because once I've built this, I'm going to save this as a template to use on any shows, and by putting it in an instrument rack means that we have the ability to automate it in the future. I won't get into that right now, but if you do want to check out how to automate drum pads and change samples midway through, you can check out the video just up there. So for now, choose the patch that you want to hit on the SPD-SX to trigger the sample. So I'm going to hit the SPD-SX where I want the sample to be. There we go. F#2 is where it's appearing. I've just hit the middle pad on the SPD-SX. You can choose whichever one you like. And then I'm just going to use this sample because I think it's amazing. The only last thing I'm going to do is just change that from SPD-SX as the input and then in for the monitoring, because basically that just means it'll constantly get a signal from the SPD-SX rather than auto, which means that the record arm has to be on for it to have an input. So that's the samples. Normally I'd then fill out the rest of the SPD-SX, but just for this video, I'm going to stick with the one. And now is the fun bit where we can create the video. So on my SPD-SX, I'm just going to change from my Ableton patch to that Vid MIDI patch, and then excitingly, open a blank project of QLab. Now, like I said at the beginning of this video, I've deliberately not paid for anything in QLab, so you can do this with just the version of QLab that you can download. The only difference here is that I'm triggering this onto my iPad. You don't have to, it will show up on your Mac as you do it. This is just so you can see it on camera here. So I'm gonna drag in all of the videos that I made. They're not very exciting, it just says this is a video. And with this, I'm just gonna click on the first track. I'm gonna go down the bottom here to triggers, MIDI trigger. I'm then gonna hit capture and then just choose a pad. So this one, and then you can see this. Oh yeah. I'm gonna do exactly the same with the other three. This is a video. There we go, that's super exciting. And we can just kind of leave QLab now in the background. Now the last thing we want to do is be able to switch between them in a song. So I'm just going to create a marker in Ableton that just says vid intro, and then like pretending there's another song here, I'm just going to put that as samples. Obviously you'd rename that to whatever it is in your gig, but for now, that'll do. I'm going to then create a new MIDI track and put that at the top, just because that's where I like it. And I'm going to name that Program Change. And I'm going to use a lack of letters because it makes me look really cool. Now within here at the beginning of these sections, I'm just going to double click to create a MIDI clip. And in this clip, we're going to go down into launch and then program is what we want. Now, do you remember earlier where I said, remember what number that patch is? For me, it's 16, which is my samples, and 22, which is my video control. So the vid intro, I want the SPD to be on program 22. And for the samples, I want that to be on program 16. And now that I've created those two clips, the last thing I'm going to do is just change that output to the SPD-SX onto channel 10. And the reason why it's channel 10 is because that's the default patch on the SPD-SX. If we go into vid intro and hit play, the SPD-SX, as you can now see, is on vid intro. But if I hit play on Ableton just a little bit before the samples and then go over to the SPD-SX, that'll now change to 16, which is my samples and things like that. So that works there. Let's go back to the beginning of the track. This is a video. Pretty crazy. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, if you're one of the patrons, you can find all of this on the Patreon page. If you have any questions, please log them in the comment section down below. And I hope you have a lot of fun with this. It's great.